What if the greatest rock song ever written hides a message no one ever heard?
Is this the real life?
A whisper buried inside the music, meant for someone or something that Freddie never named.
You've heard that line 1,000 times, but every time I play it, I still feel what Freddie left behind, something none of us ever fully understood. There's a secret in Bohemian Rhapsody we never talked about, not because it was scandalous or dark, but because it was personal. It started one late night in 1975. Freddie had locked himself inside the piano room at Rockfield Studios. When I walked by, I heard fragments of sound opera 1 minute, a funeral march the next. I knocked. He laughed through the door. "You'll hear it when it's ready, darling." Back then we didn't know we were watching lightning being bottled. I saw a man possessed, driven by something deeper than fame or money. He didn't just write notes, he confessed through them. And maybe that's why this song still breathes decades later, because Freddie didn't just give us music, he gave us a piece of his soul. But here's the thing we didn't realize then, this wasn't just a song, it was a secret message to the world and maybe to himself.
It was midsummer 1975. The Welsh countryside was quiet, except for one voice that refused to rest. Freddie had booked a small, echoing room at Rockfield Studios, the kind of place where sound seemed to hang in the air. He called it his chapel. For days, no one was allowed in. Through the thin walls, the band could hear him working like a man caught between two worlds. His laughter colliding with the hammer of piano keys, arias bleeding into heavy rock riffs. At one point, Freddie sang Galileo over and over.
Galileo, Galileo, Galileo Figaro.
His voice rising like prayer. Brian later recalled standing in the corridor, feeling both awe and confusion. "We had no idea what he was building in there," he said. It sounded like madness, but beautiful madness. When Freddie finally emerged, his hands were trembling. He looked exhausted but alive. "It's called Bohemian Rhapsody," he said, smiling as if he'd unlocked something cosmic. They sat together and Freddie played a rough version. It had no structure, no chorus, no logic, just emotion stitched together like a fever dream. When it ended, silence filled the room. Roger Taylor leaned back and whispered, "What is it?" Freddie grinned. "It's everything." At that moment, none of them knew they were witnessing the birth of a song that would outlive them all. Bohemian Rhapsody broke every rule before it even existed. 6 minutes long, no chorus, no genre, no explanation. It shouldn't have worked, but that was exactly why Freddie wrote it. After sheer heart attack success, EMI Records gave Queen full creative control, which to Freddie meant one thing: total freedom. He didn't want to make a hit. He wanted to make history. He told Brian, "We're not writing pop, we're writing immortality." The label executives panicked when they heard the first cut. Too long, too strange, too unpredictable. They wanted something radio-friendly, something safe. Freddie just smiled, leaned back in his chair, and said, "Either they play the whole thing or they don't play it at all." It was the ultimate gamble. In a decade dominated by tight radio singles, Queen had made a rock opera with no hook. But that's what made it timeless. Each section was a different emotion: grief, defiance, redemption, woven into one masterpiece. The band didn't follow a formula, they broke it. Every shift in rhythm and key mirrored Freddie's own contradictions: strength and fragility, humor and sorrow, faith and fear. What they didn't realize was that the song's chaos wasn't random. It was Freddie himself poured into melody. Years after Freddie's passing, rumors began to swirl about a missing notebook, one that contained his earliest lyrics for Bohemian Rhapsody. For decades, fans and collectors searched for it, hoping to uncover the song's true meaning. Brian May once admitted that fragments did exist. "I saw an early draft once," he said. "There were lines he cut, lines too personal to share." Those lines, according to people close to Freddie, hinted at guilt, forgiveness, and the fear of judgment. One page allegedly read, "The day I'm free, I must face myself." Freddie never confirmed who Mama was in the song. Some say it represented his mother. Others believe it symbolized a higher power, a plea to something beyond forgiveness. But Brian saw it differently. He was talking to himself, he said softly. He wasn't asking to be saved. He was trying to make peace. For all his flamboyance, Freddie carried a private darkness, a tension between the man the world saw and the man he hid inside. The notebook, if it still exists, may hold the confession that inspired it all. But even without it, the truth is written between the lines. Bohemian Rhapsody wasn't about death. It was about liberation. The operatic section of Bohemian Rhapsody still sounds like a cathedral of sound, but what's most astonishing is how it was made. There were no choirs, no session singers, just Freddie, Brian, and Roger layering their voices over and over again until the walls seemed to vibrate. In some places, there were over 180 separate vocal tracks blended together by hand. Brian once described those nights as an experiment in insanity. They would record until dawn, rewind the tape, and start again, each harmony tighter and stranger than the last. The tape reels stretched so far that the studio staff feared they might snap. When asked why he wanted it that way, Freddie said, "Because real magic is built from obsession." The result was a sound no one had ever heard before, a human choir made from 3 men and 1,000 takes. Even the guitars mimicked voices. Brian layered harmonics to echo Freddie's falsettos, creating what he called singing instruments. It wasn't just production, it was architecture. Brian later reflected, "We were building a temple and Freddie was our high priest. Every Galileo, every Figaro, every Magnifico was more than drama. It was devotion." The opera section of Bohemian Rhapsody isn't random. It's a psychological battle set to music. Each character, Scaramouche, Beelzebub, Galileo, represents a fragment of Freddie himself. Scaramouche, the clown, mirrors his stage persona. Galileo, the scientist, his curiosity and intellect. Beelzebub, the shadow he feared inside. Freddie once joked that he threw the names in just for fun, but Brian later said, that was Freddie's code. Humor was how he hid pain. When you listen closely, the opera is a duel between guilt and salvation. Bismillah cries out for divine mercy. Beelzebub drags him back into chaos. The result is an emotional exorcism disguised as theater. The deeper meaning became clear years later. Freddie wasn't inventing characters, he was talking to them. The sequence ends with a line that still feels chilling. "So you think you can stone me and spit in my eye?" It's defiance and surrender wrapped into one moment. To Freddie, art was confession. Every name he sang was a mask, and every mask was a truth he wasn't ready to say out loud. By late 1975, Queen had finished recording, but the final mix nearly destroyed the song. The master tape was overloaded. Hundreds of overdubs pushed the analog machine beyond its limits. During one session, the tape began to warp. The engineers froze. One wrong move and 6 weeks of work could vanish forever. Roger Taylor remembered that Freddie refused to stop. "He just stood there," Roger said, "watching that tape like it was alive." For 16 straight hours, they worked, cutting and splicing sections by hand, praying it would hold. At dawn, as the last chord played, the tape gave one final shudder and survived. Brian later said, "When the speakers came alive, it was like hearing a ghost breathe." What makes that story even more haunting is Freddie's quiet remark afterward. He looked at the reel, smiled faintly, and said, "If it dies, it dies. The real thing will live anyway." He was right. The song had already transcended the machine. It had become eternal. The irony? That fragile, almost broken tape carried the most indestructible anthem in music history. When Bohemian Rhapsody was finished, EMI still refused to release it. 6 minutes is suicide, they warned. Radio won't touch it. Freddie laughed. "Then we'll make them beg." That's when DJ Kenny Everett got a copy. He played snippets on his London show. Accidentally owned, of course. Within days, fans were calling nonstop, demanding the full version. The station finally gave in. The song exploded overnight. In just 2 weeks, it hit #1 in the UK. Across the Atlantic, it became the anthem of a generation. Brian remembers Freddie's reaction vividly. He walked in with champagne and said, "I told you, darling, madness always wins." The irony was poetic. What began as a studio secret became a cultural earthquake. Bohemian Rhapsody wasn't meant to fit radio. It was meant to break it. And it did. The song rewrote every rule, and Freddie reveled in it. When asked what it meant, he smiled and said, "It means whatever you need it to mean, darling." That's the beauty of it. Even now, no two people hear it the same way, and that's what makes it immortal. Decades after its release, Bohemian Rhapsody refuses to fade. It re-emerged in Wayne's World, 1992, surged again at Live Aid, and now dominates streaming charts every year. But for Brian May, the magic isn't in its numbers. It's in the silence right before it starts. When I hit that first chord live, He said, "I still feel Freddie right beside me. Every generation rediscovers the song and swears it was written for them. That's the secret. It evolves with time. The same way Freddie once evolved through pain, art, and revelation. Today, its harmonies echo in symphonies, movies, and even science classrooms. Brian once joked that physics students can map sound waves of Bohemian Rhapsody and still not explain its power. The truth is simpler. It's alive because it's human. Every laugh, every scream, every whispered, nothing really matters still carries Freddie's pulse. Some songs age, Bohemian Rhapsody breathes, and every time a new listener presses play, it starts living again. The biggest mystery isn't how it was made, but why. For decades, fans and scholars tried to decode Bohemian Rhapsody. Was it a confession? A farewell? A coded autobiography? Freddie never explained. "I'll never tell," he once said, "because I'd rather people make it their own." But looking back, many now see foreshadowing. The guilt, the plea for mercy, the acceptance of fate. Long before the world knew Freddie's personal battles, the music already did. Brian reflected years later. It's as if Freddie's art knew before he did. That's what makes Bohemian Rhapsody more than a song. It's a mirror. It reflects the listener's own fears, doubts, and triumphs. The line, "I don't want to die," feels universal because it is. Maybe Freddie didn't write about himself at all. Maybe he wrote about all of us. Nearly 50 years later, Bohemian Rhapsody still refuses to age. It's not nostalgia that keeps it alive. It's truth. Brian said it best, "We didn't just make a song, we built a world." That world has become a refuge for anyone who's ever felt different, broken, or misunderstood. The song's contradictions, humor and tragedy, bravado and fear, remind us that art doesn't need to explain itself to be eternal. Even after Freddie's passing, his voice still finds new ears. New generations sing it without realizing they're part of a conversation that began in 1975, a conversation between a man and his own reflection. Freddie once said, "You can kill the man, but not the song." He was right, because Bohemian Rhapsody didn't end when the last note faded. It just changed hosts. Now it belongs to all of us. And if you've stayed with this story until the end, remember, every time you press play somewhere, Freddie smiles. If you love stories like this one, subscribe, leave a comment, and tell us what Bohemian Rhapsody means to you. Because some legends never die. They just keep singing.